Hello everybody, this is Susan with Pumpkin Hill Stampers. I have a new card project for us to share today. This is my Stampin' Show and Tell. If it's Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, you're likely going to see a new video released by me. So if you're interested in my creations, go ahead and subscribe to the channel here so that you don't miss anything. Or if you prefer, you could subscribe to my weekly show and tell news that I publish on Tuesdays. You can get all my latest projects, promotions, specials, and whatever else is going on new with Stampin' Up all in one place. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with the project today. Today we're using two stamp sets, both from the Spring Occasions catalog, that started in January of 2018. The first one is this Flying Home set with these cute birds, and the second one is this Amazing Congratulations, which has a 3-step stamp here that we're going to use today on our card. Okay, we're also using a lot of different colors and tools today, but don't worry about taking the notes. I'll have a Google Doc link below that will have all the photos, the product, and the step-by-step instructions on how I created this project. So you can go ahead and recreate it if you wanted to. So let's get started with making this project today. Alright, so here's my sample. Let me bring that in a little closer so you can see. We are going to be doing some stamping and die cutting. We're embossing. We're going to do that triple stamp on the bottom. Then we're going to watercolor, and then we'll finish putting it all together. Alright, so let's go ahead and get our kit out here so you can see what I started with from scratch. Move these away a little bit. Alright, so I'm using a piece of old olive ribbon. Okay, this is our mini chevron ribbon. That'll be putting on at the end. We're going to have some pearls. I'm using vellum as a layer, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to watercolor, so I'm using the watercolor paper. I have a piece of Whisper White that's going to create the background on the front that we're going to stamp that congratulations on. And then my card base is in Pear Pizzazz. Now Pear Pizzazz and Old Olive are not the same color, obviously, they're called different, but they do coordinate well. So we're going to tie those together. Alright, let me move some of these pieces away for a moment so we can actually see what we're doing. Let's start with stamping our birds. So I'm using Archival Black ink. I'm going to take my bird stamp and ink that up. Then I'm going to stamp that on my watercolor paper. And then, after I get that on there, when I stamp on watercolor paper, I tend to hold it for an extra second or two. I just want the ink to really transfer into this porous paper, so I held that a little bit longer than maybe I usually do. Then I'm going to take it to my Big Shot, and I've got my stitched oval framelit from my stitched shape framelit set, and see how that fits nicely around there? So I'm going to take that to the Big Shot, and I've already done it, and it's going to come back die cut with that stitching around the edge. Okay, so there's that. We'll go back to that in a minute. Then I had this piece of vellum I said I was going to use as a layer, and I die cut that with the scalloped oval from the Layering Ovals set. So those are two pieces that I've done ahead of time, just to save a little time on the video here. Alright, now we're going to use this Archival Black again. This time I'm going to bring my Whisper White in. Now I want to zoom in a little bit on this so that you can see how I'm positioning these stamps. So just a minute while I zoom the camera in. Go slowly so no one gets seasick here. Alright, so first I put my cardstock on my grid paper, and I use my grid to kind of square it off. I feel like, personally, if everything is working in the square, then I tend to stamp the way I want to, square too. So just a little tip I use. So now I'm inking up my congratulations outline in my Archival Black, and I'm going to line this up at the bottom of my cardstock, and I want this G to be right near the bottom. So let's see if I can do this on video. So I want to center it left to right the best I can, and I want it as close to the bottom without hanging off as I can. So I put that down. I'm going to give it a press and lift. Great. Just what I wanted. Okay, now I'm going to put that Archival Black away. Now I'm going to stamp inside with soft suede. Now you might notice, I'll bring the sample in, on my card it is soft suede, But the thing I like about the soft suede ink is that it's a nice substitute for gold. If it's not too inky on your ink pad, or if you stamp it off first, it kind of gives you that gold finish without having to do embossing. Now you could emboss it with gold emboss if you wanted to, but I didn't want to add that extra step because we have so many things on this card already. So we're going to just go ahead and stamp it in the soft suede. So this is a 3-step stamp. So we have the outline first. Now I have a stamp that's got some of the letters. It's got the C, the N, and then it kind of skips along. So I'm going to ink this up on my soft suede. It's long, so I kind of have to move it along my ink pad. And then I'm going to bring it down, and looking directly over where I'm stamping, take your time. You have to line up the stamp inside of those outlines. I kind of check the C and the G and the T and the L and the S, and if I'm happy and we're going to hope that it's good, we just go ahead and set it down. Once you set it down, just go with it. You can always flip it over and try again, but we did okay. Alright, so there's the first one. Now the second one, see where it's missed the O, the top of the G, the back of the A, the U? This is the second stamp. So you could use multiple colors in creating this congratulations. I chose to stick with soft suede for the whole thing, but you could certainly use 2 different tones of green or pink or blue. Really any colors you wanted to make it a festive little congratulations for cards. So, but today I'm just using soft suede for both. So now I have to position this over the top, and again I have to look through the stamp down to my outline, and I just got to kind of multi-check the different layers, and once I get it down, I slowly put it down. Once I get it down, I just have to go with it. Okay, I can live with that. That's good. Alright, so there is our congratulations, and then one more thing, because this one is going to be a baby card, I'm stamping on your new little one, and it's going to fit right here inside this congratulations. So just between the bottom of the T and the S there, and I'm going back to that Archival Black to put that down. Okay? Alright, so there is the stamping portion of this card. So let me move some of these things away. Alright, now we're going to go back to the bird stamp and work on that one for a little bit while this dries before I run it through my Big Shot. So let's set that aside. Alright, so I'm going to leave it zoomed in so you can see me watercolor on here. I'm also going to sit down so that I can work better with my colors. Alright, so today I'm watercoloring with our Aqua Painter. So I've just filled my barrel with water. Okay, these come 2 in a pack, and then it's got this beautiful paintbrush tip here. You can see I've got water on my finger already. Now the nice thing about Aqua Painters is, let me ping this piece in just so I don't get my mess mat too watery while I'm working. If you want it drier, you could just kind of brush the tip until it's dry. If you want it wetter, you just squeeze the tip and it will get the water to drip down. So we're using an Aqua Painter. I'm also using the soft suede. Here, I'll bring this in a little bit so you can see this is what we're going to make. So I'm bringing my soft suede in, and if you have it closed and you just give it a squeeze, it will put some ink from the pad onto your lid. Okay, so now I'm going to take my Aqua Painter. So watercolor paper is very porous. I said that when I stamped the birds. If you want the paper to grab the ink and let it kind of spread, you can brush with just clean water, and I'm just going to go over the nest portion so that when I apply the color, it'll kind of run where it's already wet and kind of spread out and blend a little bit. So now I come in here and I've got water in that tip, and I'm picking up the ink. See how it bleeds in my cover there? And now if I come in here and I brush, see how that water just wants to take it and make it pool in different areas, and I can move it around with my brush. I can come back in and get more color. So I'm just trying paint the nest section at the moment. My tip is very fine, so if I work nice and light, I can work into the tight details of the image I've stamped. Another technique I like to do is to emboss the image with a black emboss. So it kind of has a raised edge. It kind of keeps the water from spreading where you don't want it. But if you work slowly and not too wet, you can really brush the color in where you want it. Alright, now with a slightly drier tip, I'm going to come back and pick up some of the brown. Now I'm going to come in and paint the branch. So see, it's the same color, but because my brush isn't as wet, I dried it off on my scrap mat, I can come around and kind of almost like a super fine tip marker, I can paint my image, but I still have that as I'm going along, it's blending out with my Aqua Painter, so I get a variation on the color as I work. I hope this is zoomed in enough so that you guys can see the way the paper grabs the water and the ink and how I can work the detail in. Alright, now I'm going to go back and add a little more color detail to the nest. So I'm going to pick up these twigs that have these harsh ends, and I'm just going to make them a little darker than the rest of the nest. So I let that dry a little bit while I was working on the branch, and now I'm coming back in. You could also come back in well after your whole image is painted and dry. If you decide you want to add a little more color detail, you can come right back on with your aqua brush and add right over the top of what you've done previously. So that's kind of a nice way to use your aqua painters. It's also very relaxing. So I made this card as a demo swap, so I was making a whole bunch of them, and I just sat and I painted multiples of these, and it was just so nice to just sit and be colorful with that. Alright, I'm going to move that away for a second. Now I'm going to come in, I'm using Pear Pizzazz as my green. Again, I'm squeezing that, I'm opening the lid. And now I'm going, my brush isn't very wet, it's just clean. I cleaned it off on my scrap mat by brushing it clean, and now I'm going to pick up some of that green. And now I'm just going to come in and touch these leaves with some green. Now again, like as I go along, my color is going to fade out because of the water. So where I touch first is going to get the darkest. And if I kind of come along, even though I've got green on there and I pre-wet some of these, it's going to grab the ink differently than if I touch it dry. See, and I can just go right back over those and add coloring. So this one's dry. See how it goes on almost like a marker? And now if I pre-wet the bottom and I come back with some ink on my brush, see how it just spreads it out nicely? So depending on how wet or dry your paper and brush are in combination, you will get a different effect with your aqua painter. So you really need to stamp up some images and just play with them, with wetnesses and colors and application, until you find your own method of applying the ink so that you get the results you want. Alright, taking my brush off, closing up the Pear Pizzazz. A little tip, if your pads, when you're aqua painting, get very wet in the lid, you probably want to dry them off, because if you close the lid up with all that water in there, it's going to bleed out your pad. So you don't want that. Alright, I'm using Marina Mist for the blue. Now I'm going to come in and do the mama bird's tail and wing patch here first, because I want that to be darker than the rest, even though it's going to be a bluebird. I'm just going to try to have that detail be a little separate from the rest of the color I use. Alright, and see how I was able to use that brush really well to just get in there and do that detail. So now I'm coming around, I'm kind of pre-wetting my birds here. I do have a little bit of blue ink on my pen still, but that's okay because I'm going to come back with blue after. Alright, so I kind of pre-painted those. Now I'm going to come in with a little more color. Add that in here. But that's the nice thing about Aqua Painters, I was saying. You can get very light color for a watercolor. You can get very detailed color if you're using a more dry or darker brush. I can work right into the edges and kind of pull my color around. So, and with Aqua Painters, with just being water, you can use it with any of your colors. And if you don't have the ink pads and you just have the re-inkers, you could just squirt a little re-inker on a plastic dish and go to town painting. So don't feel like if you don't have all the all the stamp pad colors that you can't do this, because you certainly can. Alright, I'm going to bring the soft suede back in. I'm going to come back in and do their beaks. Now I want my brush really dry, so I'm going to brush some of that water out of it. And I'm going to come in here and pick up the darker color that hasn't been painted out. And I'm just going to paint their beaks. Roll my tip there to get nice and tight again. And get in there. There. Alright, and these guys are really little. You barely touch them to get that color to apply. But you can do it. You can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. There. Alright. Happy with that. So, let me put the ink and the Aqua Painter away. Put your tip back on. Keep that from drying out. Alright, so now I'm just going to layer this piece of watercolor paper. Okay, I'll flip that over, add some snail. And this is where I'm adding the vellum. So, let me stick this on here. See how it just peeks out just a little bit around the edges? Thought that was a nice soft touch for a baby card. Alright, so here was our card. I'm going to zoom out in just a minute. Here was our card, so I added just this thin layer of vellum behind, which we just did. And it's just going to come lifted off the paper a little bit, but it just adds a little bit of flourish to our card project. Okay. Now we have some more work to do. So let's go ahead and zoom back out so you can see my whole work table. Alright, so we have our card. We have our piece to go on the front of our card when we get back to it. Move some of these things out of the way. It's a lot of stuff on the table today. Alright, so now I'm going to bring the Big Shot in. And I'm going to show you a little trick I use for embossing sometimes. So we have to open up our platform. We need the bottom platform. We're going to be embossing this piece for our card. I'm using the Layered Leaves Dynamic folder, okay, which is one of our thick folders. And you can notice I have a post-it note on here. So on my card, I have this stamped congratulations, but then I have the top part embossed with those leaves. Okay, they're not two pieces, it's one piece. You could do two pieces. You could stamp your words on a bottom piece and you could emboss a top piece, and then you could hide the seam with our ribbon, but I'm going to show you how I do it without using two pieces of paper. Okay, but whatever works better for you, you go right ahead. Alright, so I stamped this at the bottom. It's not going to work for everything because you can have the limit of 6 inches here. But I'm going to now slide this in to my folder. Apparently I'm very staticky here today, everything's sticking to my folder. So I'm sliding this into my folder. I'm trying to get my letters to be near to, but not too close to the embossing plate. I have this posted on here because I'm going to do a whole bunch of these for my swap to try to give me a guide if that's where I want to be lining up my line. Alright, that goes on there. And then, because this is our thick folder, I only need one plate. So I just put one plate over the top. Hopefully it doesn't shake the table too much today. I'll go slow. So I just run this through. And that's going to do the dry embossing for us. Take this apart, and voila. We've got our words on the bottom, we've got our embossing on the top, and we've got one piece to work with instead of two pieces to put back together. Alright, let me move this away so we can go back to putting the card together. Okay, let's start layering our pieces on, and then we'll add all of our embellishments. So, we've got our card base. I'll give that a good fold with my bone folder. I'm going to bring my piece of ribbon in. So now my ribbon is going to go right over the seam between those, the flat piece and that piece. But you wouldn't need to, you could just leave it like that, but I like that extra piece of color in there. So here's a little tip. I have one piece of ribbon. I'm going to flip over my cardstock and run my snail up the edges. And then I take my ribbon across the front and I just tack it on the back. See how I did that? Just tacked it there on the back. Alright, and then I'm going to snail that to the front of my card. So now I'm going to add some more snail. You can go over that little ribbon piece if you want to. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Now this, I'm just going to position on the center of my front of my card. Alright. So far so good. Now, I already have this piece that I constructed, and I'm going to put that on dimensionals. Give that a little pop up. I'm going to center that on my card the right way. Alright, putting that here. See how that vellum, it kind of peeks over there, and it peeks down here, and it just kind of gives you that added softness to the front of the card. It also doesn't give you a whole lot of weight, so that's a nice perk if you've got to mail these. Alright, one last tip I'm going to show you is with our blender pens. See, I've got these green pearls on here. So what I've done is I have our basic pearl jewels, and I have my blender pen. This one is Old Olive, but like I said, Old Olive and Pear Pizzazz are nice coordinating colors. Now I'm going to take my blender pen, it's an alcohol-based pen, and I'm just going to come right around and color my pearl. I did this at Christmas time with our rhinestone gems, and at that point I used a Sharpie marker to color them because we didn't have real red in our blender pens and I wanted red. But our blender pens that coordinate with all of our colors that they're issued in so far will do the same thing. So I just add some color to those, and then I'm going to use my scissors, just come in and pick these off, and then I can set these down. I do 3. I tend to do my embellishments and sometimes my stamping in odd numbers. So see, I put that on there, and then I can just use those scissors to tap it down. That way if the ink is still a little bit wet, I'm not removing it with my skin. And there we go. We recreated the card. So there's a lot of little steps for this one, but in the end it's a beautiful card, if I say so myself. And I think whoever would receive it, who's expecting, would be very happy to have that in their card collection. So I hope you enjoyed our little show and tell today. That is the project. If you did like it and you want to see more, you can again subscribe to my channel. A thumbs up or a comment below is always welcome. If you want to shop for any of these products, I am a Stampin' Up demonstrator, so there's a link below for my online store. And I'll put all the items I used here there with a quick, easy shopping list. So if you only need a couple of them, you can just pick out the ones you need to add to your collection. Don't forget the Google Doc, so I have all the details for what I used and how I put this together. Don't be a stranger. Go ahead and use this card in your own collection or change it up a little bit. You can contact me below if you want to subscribe to my newsletter I talked about that I put out on Tuesdays so that you can create all these fabulous things in your own home and enjoy the art of stamping. Okay, Again, all the links are below. If you need any help, contact me. And until next time, I will say bye-bye. Happy stamping!